All right, the question is, what are we going to do about it? Ladies and gentlemen, we've been talking about Donald Trump and threat of tariffs, and over the weekend, he's repeating threats about steel and aluminum specifically this time. But since this trade war began between Canada and the United States, one of the first responses we've seen from all types of governments, right, it doesn't matter the level, is we need to remove interprovincial trade barriers. Ladies and gentlemen, I think there are a lot of people in this country that have been talking about it for quite some time. Yet we fail to see action, right? But I think now it's more serious than ever. Christopher Skeete joins us right now, Minister for the Economy and in charge of this dossier, removing these interprovincial trade barriers. Mr. Skeete, Christopher, welcome back to the CJD.
Thanks for having me. It's nice to be in studio.
Yeah, it's nice to have you in studio. Okay, so listen, we got a good relationship. I'll tell everyone. We went to Dawson back in the day. We went to Dawson College for crying out loud. So give it to me straight.
Okay.
We've got now 3 weeks until the 30 days are up, okay? Forget the steel and aluminum just for a moment here. Are we actually getting stuff done on removing interprovincial trade barriers? Because I think it's a lot of talk, and then I don't see any progress. What's happening?
Well, there has been progress. So there's two things. There's work to be done, and there's work that's been done. Since 2018, we've seen a $51 billion increase in cross-border trade between the provinces, which is about 34% increase in trade. So we've had a trade agreement with the rest of Canada for some time. Now, there are, of course, still irritants that exist. And I think a lot of people focus on these irritants. I'm less focused on the symbolic irritants and more focused on what will drive revenue, what will drive economic results. And so some things like I hear a lot of people talk about alcohol. That's an issue when you're trying to cross the border with alcohol. Is there really a strong dollar amount there? I don't think so. So I'm focused on the big stuff. And we had a meeting a couple of weeks ago in Toronto with the other ministers, and we agreed to move faster.
Okay, so agreed to move faster. How fast can we move? One of my worries is that it's still Canada, it's still Quebec. We have these ginormous bureaucracies, and everything is really slow. And you have an American president that is like, poof, executive order, done. So can we move at a pace to keep up with the Americans?
Well, there's two things I think the listeners need to remember. First of all is the Canadian market is 40 million people. We'll never replace a $400 million market with 40 million people. Mm-hmm. That being said, we are looking to go faster. But I mean, people need to recognize that we've already moved the needle a lot over the past few years since we signed this trade agreement, and there's still work to be done. Let me give you an example of one of the problems that we have. In a lot of ways, it's easier to sign an agreement with the United States and Mexico, which is a 3-way, as opposed to 13 ways. People forget that we're in a federation. We have 13 parliaments. That means 13 people have to agree to move forward on something, which is why it's historically difficult to move forward. We are making progress. We decided as a group last Friday or 2 Fridays ago to focus on 5 to 10 areas of mutual recognition. And that's a very, fancy trade term for when I say helmets in Quebec are safe, Alberta says they're safe because Quebec said so. Getting that 13 times over in the case of a helmet is tough. So imagine that for every single product on the market. It's an issue. We agreed that we need to look at the big number, which is the things that'll move the needle the fastest. That's what came out of last Friday.
Okay, so what's at the top of the list? What can you say is something that will change sooner than later?
One of the things that we agreed to do in that meeting was to do a harmonized trucking pilot. Basically, trucking's a big deal. But let me give you an example of one of the, the dumbest things, but one of the things that actually stops trade. We have little orange triangles, in the back of a long truck to say this truck is long. Yeah. Well, other provinces have blue triangles. Other provinces have red triangles. That kind of foolishness actually makes people say, well, I'm just not going to carry my truck into Quebec, or I'm going to bypass this area and go straight to the U.S. So things like that of harmonization would go a long way towards making our truckers' lives easier. Okay. And so what we agreed to do a couple weeks ago was to say, let's find 5 to 10 that we all agree are priority, and let's do that. We're going to meet back in a few weeks, look at what those items are, and set the priority.
So you're going to meet back in a few weeks. By that time, the 30-day deadline will have come. And this is the thing, like my worry is, again, you have a president that snaps his fingers, gets something done, And here in Canada, well, we're going to reconvene in 3 weeks. All about triangles on the back of trucks.
Well, to be fair, Elias, as I said, I think you can't underestimate the difficulty of getting 13 people in a room to agree.
But the resolve is like, isn't the resolve like, okay, now we're backed up into the corner here? Isn't the resolve 13 or how many 13 provinces and territories? We can't delay anymore.
So that was the resolve a couple of weeks ago. For a lot of time, people were discussing and things were kind of moving slow. The fact that we had a meeting a couple of weeks ago, the fact that we're meeting again in a couple of weeks means we're moving the needle. But look, I don't want to say that there isn't work to be done. A lot of the work has been done. As I said, $51 billion in the last 6 years is a big deal. And of course, we're going to do our best to facilitate that trade. But let's face it, we're not going to replace a $400 million market with 40 million people.
Okay, so if we can't do that, right? So you're so right. We're not going to replace 400 million with 40 million. Certainly seems to me we're in a very difficult spot, right? So and aluminum and steel, let's bring that into the conversation. What happens to Quebec aluminum if it gets hit with a 25% tariff?
Well, we had this in Trump version 1, he tried to impose tariffs on aluminum. It didn't last very long because they quickly realized that, auto plants in South Carolina need Quebec aluminum. When they realized that, the barriers came off very quickly. I suspect they'll come to the same realization. He's very he's very assertive in that he doesn't need us. In certain areas, he absolutely needs us. And one of the first things we saw last Saturday when he enacted the threat of the 25% tariffs, immediately the National Home Builders Association came out. Immediately the U.S. Chamber of Commerce came out to say, if you do this, it's catastrophic. I suspect the same thing will happen with aluminum. All it will do will increase the price of cars for Americans. That's it. They're still going to need our aluminum. And if it needs to go through the UK to come back to the US to do it, it's going to end up being just more expensive for the consumer.
We're with Christopher Skeete. He's a minister responsible for economy, and this interprovincial trade barrier dossier is on his plate as well. So let's just talk about the threat from Donald Trump. I want to make Canada the 51st state. How seriously do you take it? How seriously does the premier take it?
Well, there's two things. I think, what came out of last Friday's meeting with business in an industry with the Prime Minister of Canada, Mr. Trudeau, was that he believes that he's serious. Yeah. What we saw yesterday during the pre-Super Bowl was him saying, I am serious. So, I mean, we have to take...
But do you, I'm probably asking for your personal opinion, which is... Do you actually think he's... I know he says it, but do you actually think he's serious about making us a state?
I have to tell you, Elias, one of the things that people are really going to have to understand is that the era of the post-World War II world order is over. It's over. And so we're going to have to wrap our minds around things that we thought were impossible in the past. So to answer your question, I don't have the answer to that question because I don't know what waits us for tomorrow. What I do know is that we have a lot of work to do. I don't think we're in a position of strength historically, and we have to buckle down and get to work. And one of the reasons why I'm really happy to have this economic dossier is I think we need to do just that. I think the Americans are completely disillusioned as to how much they need us, and we need to remind them of that. But at the same time, I think Canada, Quebec, we need to get our ducks in a row and take this seriously. So whether or not he's serious, we need to get to work.
How much do you think this has to do with the drug issue, the immigration issue? Those are other things that he's said, right? Yeah. From your perspective, do we need is that the key? Do we have to take these other issues and then the trade stuff will go away?
Well, this is going to be a shout out to Concordia and the School of Community and Public Affairs. One of the things that came out of my poli-sci degree, I specialized in U.S. politics. And one of the things that I know is that in terms of trade and executive orders, the president doesn't have the power right now to enact executive orders unless there's an imminent threat. Tariffs are the purview of Congress. And so it's convenient that alluding to a national threat allows them to act quickly. I would say the data is pretty clear. Canada is less than 1% of the fentanyl problem in the U.S. It is a problem. We've agreed to help them with it. I don't think that that's a strong legal leg to stand on, but I do agree that it gives them a lot of power right now.
Just on the interprovincial trade barriers, Quebec has always had more than the other provinces. I know language comes into that, right? Because there are certain things when it comes to employees going between provinces. But what can you say to Quebec specifically, which has had more barriers than the rest of the provinces, and how serious Quebec is going to take it to be at, of the 13 premiers you're talking about, Quebec to be a leader when it comes to bringing down those barriers?
So you're right. Quebec has the most exceptions. We're also not like other provinces. One of our exceptions is that we're willing to recognize mutual mobility of the labor force, but we ask that if you come here to work, you need to understand French. That's a big one. Another one, I think, other provinces, I don't understand why they don't have this one, is if you want to buy agricultural land, you need to be a Quebec resident. This is aimed to reduce speculation and to keep food prices low. I don't understand why we'd want to increase speculation for agricultural lands. It's not land like others. So we have exceptions. We have more than other provinces, and we've agreed to re-examine our exemptions in light of what's happening now. And I think we will be able to take a look seriously at a few of them being removed. But honestly, looking at the exceptions only is like trying to see the forest behind a tree.
And you think we can have a concrete announcement from all the provinces and territories in a few weeks?
Actually, the last announcement that we made under the leadership of the Northwest Territories was a pretty significant movement from historical times that we've had. I expect that we'll be able to make some progress going forward, and the next meeting is in early March. So I'll come back if you'd like.
Absolutely. Christopher, thank you. It's always a pleasure to have you here in studio.
Anytime, Alex.
From the CAQ government, Christopher Skeete, Minister for the Economy and in charge of this interprovincial trade barrier dossier. Thanks again.
Thank you.